Sophomores, happy Thursday to you all. We are going to be going through books 9 and 10 of the Aeneid today, and just talking through them a little bit. Just a reminder, make sure that you complete those reading checks and discussion board posts by the end of today. That would be fabulous. All right, so books 9 and 10, a lot of fighting, a lot of killing going on in these ones. So book 9 kind of opens with Juno sending Iris down to Turnus to tell Turnus that, hey, the Trojan camp is without Aeneas, because remember, Aeneas in the last chapter was up with the Arcadians and seeking their help. And he has recently gotten a band of Arcadians with him, and he's also gone to the Etruscans to seek for help as well. So he's kind of he's away. So Turnus rallies the Rutulians and his kind of coalition, and goes up against the Trojan encampment because he knows that they are without their main leader. All right, so they are understaffed, as it were, and also they don't have the guy that really holds them all together. All right, so he attacks the camp, but he has some troubles because he can't get the Trojans out of the camp to fight a battle. And there's a great line in there that talks about them, talks about the Trojans knowing how to defend a wall, because that's what they did for 10 years, and they did a really good job of it. So now they're in another location and they're defending a wall once again. And you'll see Trojans got Turnus. Turnus is described as a wolf here, kind of prowling around, trying to figure out what to do. And then later at the end of that book, he's described as a lion. So you see this very very fierce, almost animalistic nature to him. That he wants to kill, he wants to destroy his enemies. So he can't get them out of the camp, so what he decides to do is to burn their ships. All right, so he thinks that will either it will either get them out of the camp to fight, or it will completely cut off any means they have of getting away and retreating. So either way, it's a victory for him. So that's what he does. He tries to burn the ships, but then we find out these ships were made from a sacred grove, and what happens is when they try to burn these ships, the ships turn into a bunch of sea nymphs, because the Jupiter allowed them to not be burned because it was from this sacred grove, but to kind of return to their I guess immortal state, if you will. All right, so it's I think it's a grove sacred to his mother, if I remember correctly, something like that. So anyway, the ships don't actually burn; they become sea nymphs. So that's kind of cool. And Turnus, there are none so blind as they who will not see. And Turnus deceives himself and thinks that, hey, this is actually a good omen for us Rutulians. And but he of course reads things wrong. It's actually something that's good for the Trojans, kind of showing that their ships had divine origin and they had reached their homeland. But Turnus reads it as he will. All right. Now, the Trojans are still in a rather bad situation because they are besieged, and night falls, and Nisus, who you may remember from back in Book 5, he was the runner that was going to win the foot race, but he then slipped in blood and guts and wasn't able to get first place. He has this idea of breaking out of the Trojan camp and cutting through enemy lines at night and bringing word to Aeneas that he needs to come back and help defend the camp. So he tells his friend Euryalus, and yes, there is, unfortunately, there is a bit of a relationship there. Thankfully, it's not very explicit or anything, but yes, there is a bit of a relationship. So he tells Euryalus, and they take this message to the leaders of the Trojans that are kind of having a little powwow. And the leaders are very impressed with their bravery and their courage, and they think that this plan is a great idea because they obviously can't send a large group because that's going to get intercepted. But if they can send one or two messengers out to reach Aeneas, that would be ideal. All right. And Iulus, or Ascanius, is also very impressed with their bravery, and he is probably about the same age as Euryalus. They're roughly contemporaries. And he asks, Euryalus asks Ascanius to make sure that his mother is taken care of as well. So he kind of shows some of that pietas that is so thematic in this book. All right, so Nisus and Euryalus sneak out of the camp, and then they go. They kind of make their way through the Rutulians, and this is at night. Remember, so a lot of the Rutulians are asleep. Some of them are probably a little bit wasted because they've got the Trojans kind of where they want them. And Nisus and Euryalus go and they kill quite a few Rutulians. Not a ton, but a decent number. But they also take some of their stuff, which was probably not the best idea. But, taking other enemies' things is kind of a status symbol and a sign of glory and all that sort of thing. So they take some of their stuff, and they get out of the Rutulian camp, and start making their way to... I think it's a grove, but unfortunately, there's some Rutulians, like a scouting party that is coming back, and they spot this helmet that Euryalus had taken, and so the Rutulians, led by a guy named Vulcanes, they run them down. Nisus is actually able to escape. He's able to get to relative safety. But Euryalus is caught and surrounded. And Nisus goes back to try to help and try to save him. And Nisus is actually able to kill several of the Rutulians that have surrounded Euryalus. And he even kills Vulcanes as well. But unfortunately, he dies while he's trying to save Euryalus. So Euryalus gets killed by the Rutulians, and then Nisus also gets killed while going back to try to save him. And it's a very it's a moving and a powerful story of courage. Because yes, Euryalus was foolish. But Nisus would not leave his friend behind. So it's a powerful story of courage, friendship, and you don't leave your friends behind, even if it means something bad is going to happen to you. So it's it is tragic, but it also is powerful as well. And Virgil actually kind of goes into, there are a couple spots in the story where he goes into first person. Not a ton, but there are several places. And if you look at, I guess it's 633. He says, "Fortunate both, if in the least my songs avail. No future day will ever take you out of the record of remembering time, while children of Aeneas make their home around the capital's unshaken rock, and while the Roman father governs all." All right, so Virgil's basically, he says that, hey, you guys are going to live on, Nisus and Euryalus, you guys are going to live on as long as there's still time, and as long as Romans are still around, and Latin's still around today. So hey, oh yeah. Now the Rutulians take the bodies of Nisus and Euryalus, and they decapitate them because yeah. And then they, parade their heads in front of the Trojan camp. And it's obviously makes Euryalus' mother completely distraught, which is very understandable because her son is dead and being desecrated. So it's a very sad scene there as well. And then we get more of kind of really a battle scene between the two sides here, and just a couple things to point out. You do get a lot of this guy kills this guy, and then this guy kills this guy, and this guy kills this guy. But just a couple kind of interesting points to make. Virgil once again mentions the muse. He actually mentions the muse a couple times in this book and the next. You see Turnus. He just kills large swaths of people. You also have an interesting incident where Ascanius or Iulus gets involved, and he shoots a excellent shot that kills a guy named Remulus, I believe. And then Apollo intervenes and tells him he needs to kind of stay out of the fighting. And it's kind of an interesting one that Apollo kind of seems a little random, but he is the god of archery. And apparently he was also very closely tied with Caesar Augustus, who was part of the Julian clan. So that's kind of very closely tied with Iulus. So Iulus' safety is very important there. Okay, and then there's some other interesting parts. Two brothers open up the doors of the camp, and there's kind of this little like thrust out of the camp to kind of like a pulse, to try to kill some of the enemies. But then when they close the doors, close the gates. Unfortunately, some of their guys get left outside of the gates, some of the Trojans, and then some of the Rutulians get inside the gates, which is mostly not a problem, except that one of those Rutulians is Turnus. All right, so the book 9 has kind of ends with Turnus inside the Trojan camp, which is really bad, and he he ends up killing several Trojans. Finally, the Trojans get themselves together though, and are able to kind of pressure him, and he jumps over the wall into the Tiber River and is able to get to safety. And that's how book 9 ends. And you'll notice book 9, it is interesting. Aeneas is actually not present at all in book 9, which is kind of an interesting feature to it. Okay, book 10, the battle continues, and this is going to be a lot more blood and guts going on. But it starts off with actually a council of the gods, and Jupiter has this nice little council, little powwow, and he's like, hey guys, what's going on here? Why is everyone fighting? But there's kind of funny line on line 13. He said, well, before that, he says, now refrain, be pleased to endorse the league I have decreed. And then says, Jupiter's words were few, not so the words of golden Venus in reply. So Jupiter doesn't say a whole lot at first, but then Venus makes her case about, why are the Trojans getting attacked still? And she goes on for, 50 plus lines. And then Juno picks up her 2 cents as well, and she makes her case about how terrible all this is. And so Jupiter eventually makes the decision, and he tries to play it very diplomatically here, because Jupiter, yes, he is the most powerful of the gods, but he also is trying to keep everybody happy. So he makes the decision that the gods need to stay out of the action and let the mortals and their courage kind of decide for itself. So if you look on lines, let's see here, 154 and following, says, the effort each man makes will bring him luck or trouble. To them all, King Jupiter is the same king, and the fates will find their way. Okay, so however the mortals act, that is going to be kind of what decides their whether they're going to be, fortunate or in trouble. And then let the fates kind of decide. And then you see him kind of make this it's interesting. When the gods need to make a really kind of binding agreement, they swear by the river Styx. Okay, and you kind of see that here. Then by his Stygian brothers' rivers, boiling banks, the black whirlpool, he took oath nodding, making all Olympus tremble at his nod. So that's kind of how the gods ratify promises and stuff like that. All right. Okay. After that, we get back to the mortals, and the Trojans are in a bit of a rough plight, and he talks about some of them that are still hanging on. But then we get Aeneas. Aeneas is back, and he is on some ships, and he is sailing with reinforcements. Okay, and we get the Muses invoked again on line 223, and we get this kind of listing of the ships that are coming with Aeneas as reinforcements to help with the Trojans. All right, and they meet some friends along the way, these ships, and the friends they meet are actually former ships. Those sea nymphs that Turnus had tried to burn. They actually they help Aeneas's ships reach shore more quickly. And they're sailing down from Etruria, which is geographically is a bit north of Rome, so that's kind of, I think, where they're coming from. It's not a long ways, I don't think, but these sea nymphs help speed up the journey. All right, so they make landfall, and you've got these Aeneas and his company trying to storm the beach, as it were. And then Turnus and the Latins and Rutulians are kind of defending the beach. And again, you're going to get a lot in this book, a lot of this guy killed this guy killed this guy. But I want to focus on some of the big ones. Couple important points. We do see Pallas takes a very important role in this. Pallas's fellow Arcadians are kind of get a little squeamish and start running away, sort of, or trying to get away. And Pallas, who is, he's a young guy, he rebukes them and he encourages them and gets them back into the fight. And Pallas fights very boldly, very nobly, and he is able to kill several of the enemy very very skillfully. All right, but then Turnus gets involved, and he decides that he needs to take Pallas on himself. All right, and apparently he is informed by his sister Juturna, it's a great name, who is a nymph. She kind of talks to him a little bit. But if you look on what is this, line 612, he says, "The time has come to interrupt this battle. I take Pallas. Pallas falls to me." And then we see this line, "I wish his father stood here to watch," which is really kind of a cruel thing. And it's reminiscent in this book back to Pyrrhus or Neoptolemus, who you may remember killed Priam's son before him and then killed Priam. And then also reminiscent of in the Iliad, where what's his face? Sorry, Achilles kills Hector before the gates of Troy, and then desecrates his body with his father watching this whole time. So you can see Turnus is in a lot of ways kind of similar to something of an Achilles figure in certain regards. Okay, so Pallas and Turnus kind of match up, and Pallas fights bravely. And you see Hercules up in heaven, because you may remember Hercules. He's the greatest of the Greek heroes, but he was made a god, and you see him up in heaven, and he is groaning because he is bemoaning the fact that this is not looking good for Pallas. And you have this powerful line from Jupiter. Line 650, "Every man's last day is fixed. Lifetimes are brief and not to be regained for all mankind. But by their deeds to make their fame last, that is labor for the brave." Below the walls of Troy, so many sons of gods went down, among them, yes, my child, Sarpedon. Turnus, too, is called by fate. He stands at the given limit of his years. So no person can go beyond their fated time of death, and this is going to be Pallas's time to die, and he fights nobly against Turnus, but Turnus is much the stronger warrior, and he kills him, and then he takes something from Pallas. He strips from him a sword belt, a very nice and elaborate sword belt, and he kind of takes it as a trophy of his victory over Pallas. All right, and then Aeneas catches word of Pallas's death, and he is just kind of overcome and overwhelmed, and he basically goes into Hulk rage mode. And he's already an excellent warrior, but he just starts cutting guys down left and right. And you see kind of a different side of Aeneas. A lot of times you think of him as being very, he is a man of pietas, a man of duty, of honor. But he's also a fierce warrior, and you really get that side of him here. He's a very interesting character because he's not one-sided. There's lots of different facets to him, and he cuts guys down left and right, And then we get, and he's trying to get to Turnus. Then we have this picture of Jupiter and Juno having a little talk, and Jupiter basically reminds Juno that, hey, you can't change the fate of Turnus. But if you want to delay it a little bit, I'll grant you that much. So Juno decides to get Turnus out of the battle, to delay his death, I guess you could say. And this is kind of for Turnus, this is very inglorious. But what she does is she creates basically a phantom Aeneas, and this phantom Aeneas gets on board a ship, and Turnus goes after him, goes and chases him onto this ship, and then the ship is cut loose, and sails off to sea, and Turnus finds out that this phantom he was chasing is not Aeneas. It's just a ghost, and kind of just evaporates. And he is thoroughly, I guess, embarrassed or ashamed. I'm not sure exactly how to put it. It's very ignoble for him, because he's gone off from the battle, and he can't do anything about it. It was unintentional completely. And then we have, let's see here, we have Aeneas, and we have, we next get the fellow Mezentius, and Mezentius has been mentioned a couple times, and he is a particularly nasty character. He's described as a tyrant, and described as someone who doesn't fear the gods, which is really bad. But he is also a very great warrior. So we get some picture of him, kind of, killing a bunch of people. And then we get Aeneas that he will be going up against in just a little bit. But the battle here is fairly evenly matched. If you look on, let's see here, so line 1059. In the battle, excuse me, sorry, line 1059, the battle now Mars evenly dealt out to both sides, heavy grief, mutual death, both killing, both going down in equal numbers, winners and losers, neither any longer knowing the meaning of retreat. And the gods in Jove's long hall pitied the empty rage of these two armies, the painful toil mankind must bear. So it's interesting, you have the gods actually pitying men, and seeing how difficult their life is. They go around killing each other and stuff. Okay, then we get this confrontation between Mezentius and Aeneas, and you can see some of the differences. You see line 1101, then the God-fearing captain Aeneas made his throw, which is in stark contrast to Mezentius, who is described elsewhere as being one who doesn't fear the gods. All right, and Aeneas throws a spear, and he doesn't kill Mezentius with this, but he wounds him very badly. And then Mezentius's son Lausus, who is a prince, rushes out to try to help his father and defend his father, while his father is taken off to safety. And Aeneas kills Lausus, who is trying to defend his father. But Aeneas, at the same time, you can see Aeneas does have a great deal of respect for Lausus and his courage. We see on lines 1154, "O poor young soldier, how will Aeneas reward your splendid fight? How honor you in keeping with your nature?" And he says, "Keep the arms you love to use, for I return you to your forebears' ashen shade. if this concerns you now. Unlucky boy, your one consolation for sad death is this: you die by the sword thrust of great Aeneas. So he lets him. He doesn't. Aeneas does not like strip his armor, strip it, take his stuff, because that's a very common thing. Is warriors would take another warrior's armor or whatever, or sword or something, as a trophy. And Aeneas is like, I'm not going to do that. You were a brave guy that died before your time. Then Mezentius finds out that his son is dead, and he is obviously very grieved by this, and he basically knows that he's going to die, but he wants to take the fight to Aeneas again. So even though he's a wicked man, you still see some courage and some goodness in him, even though it's not, so at least some nobility, I guess you could say. So he goes, he has to get on a horse because he can't really walk very well. So he tries to, he goes after Aeneas, and he kind of circles him with his horse. He's not able to attack Aeneas, though, because remember, Aeneas has this awesome shield that he is able to ward off his spears and everything. And then Aeneas takes a spear and actually kills the warhorse that Mezentius is on, and Mezentius is thrown off the horse, and then Aeneas plunges him through, and thus dies the tyrant Mezentius. And he does ask Aeneas to share the same grave as his son, so he asks for a proper burial, even though he knows he's about ready to die. So it's a lot of death, a lot of blood and guts, and you get a lot of nameless characters too, or I mean people that are not important to the actual story dying. But I think that's a good picture of war has many casualties, and a lot of the people that die in war, they may just be names to a lot of people, but there's someone's child, there's someone's son, there's someone's daughter, and that's kind of shows some of the futility and the evil of war. And I think that's one thing that you can kind of see when you're reading all these names, even though they may not, certain names will not mean much. I think it kind of goes to show the nature of war. All right. So for next Thursday, finish the book, books 11 and 12, and also for next week, just so you know, coming up, you got a vocab quiz on Monday, and then we'll have this will be our last vocab quiz of your Latin 2 career, and then we'll have a test on Wednesday. All right, and the test will be your last test of your Latin 2 career. Okay. Test, of course, will be open book, open note. Vocab quiz, I do ask that you not use your book or notes. But, yeah, so, and again, just make sure you do your discussion boards and reading checks for both books 9 and 10. If you haven't done that yet, make sure you do that. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions. And I love you guys, and I'll talk to you later.